Good evening. How are you? Well, the weather is cold outside and raining, and it has been for several days. And some tell me the next several days going forward will also be full of rain. So I thought there were a few things that I might comment on. Those who asked about our visit to Johns Hopkins, it was fine, and it was about myself. It was about my eyes that clouded up when Holly was in the hospital, and this was to make sure they were fine, and they are. Apparently, I can see you. If they appear dilated today, it's not because of the medicine; it's because I went swimming. um, what is going on is a continuation and evolution of what has gone on. We see the struggle in the Middle East, of course, and we see Netanyahu basically saying he's going to go it alone because he has what he needs from America. He didn't say that, but that's plainly what he's saying. And we are pushing harder for less militants and for more aid to the people, and Netanyahu doesn't appear ready to do that. The additional thing he's done, which reminds us of what dictators do, was that he has basically outlawed Al Jazeera for covering because he has not liked the coverage. He didn't say they did anything violent. He didn't say that they were doing anything that was outside the bounds of the First Amendment. But he's closed them down because he wants there to be no voices disagreeing with his own. Now, our country has played around with these from time to time, certainly in the wars. But the first event was John Adams. The Alien Sedition laws, he didn't want anything said that was negative about America. And Trump has basically promised, if he's elected, that he's not going to let those who disagree with him speak as freely as they might. It's interesting, moving from the Middle East to Columbia, my alma mater, that Republican judges on the bench have spoken out and said they won't hire law clerks who went to Columbia during the period of the protest there. So that means someone who is just watching it or nearby. This means people who were not arrested. And I guess it means people who were arrested. In those cases, if they follow suit as they did after the riots, so-called riots in '68, they worked out arrangements in terms of kind of deferred prosecutions often and dismissals depending on what people did. In other words, it was a way to resume classes that were disrupted and have a graduation commencement. Although Columbia is not having, as I understand it presently, any commencement. But for the judges to say this, when they're supposed to celebrate the Constitution and celebrate non-discrimination and celebrate freedom of speech, tells us a lot about the failure of our appointments to the bench, which has been a long campaign by the Republicans on both sides of the Hill and by Trump to populate positions on the bench with people who are ideologues and supportive of Trump, no matter what, at the disadvantage of our individual liberties and constitutional rights. This is not acceptable, and this is among the things that we're concerned about in the upcoming election. We cannot have judges we can't trust, and we've seen several. For one, we have decisions in recent days by, I call her Judge Loose Cannon down in Florida, not setting any trial date. It's her obligation to do that. I hold accountable the goodwill of the special counsel, Smith, because he decided not to move for her recusal after the Court of Appeals had made it pretty clear that she was leaning heavily on behalf of the former president rather than doing her job. And I think that was the time to strike out. And the events since have proven that to be true. Now, they may or they may not do it. And to whatever extent the Attorney General has a say in what motions are brought in court, we have to be concerned, because if there has been a weak nilly in this entire event, it has been our Attorney General, Garland. Now, returning to Trump in the courtroom, an extension of what you would think would be the Attorney General, but luckily we have a state prosecutor, a county prosecutor, Manhattan County, prosecuting Trump And just as Trump, is a matter of PR, was preparing the nation for the fact that he was going to be indicted and downplaying it and selling T-shirts of him and so forth, now they're trying to prepare people, the public, for a guilty verdict. Now, I celebrate that because I agree that that's possible, and I think it could happen as early as the end of next week. I assume that Michael Cohen is maybe the only remaining important witness. I think they have, that is, the prosecution has, done everything they can to shore up anticipated attacks on his credibility by the witnesses they've had, by the documents they presented, by the tapes that they've had. And I think it's going to be very hard to get past these things to find anyone who would hang the jury on 34 counts. So I would say it's a pretty clear path to conviction. There are motions that will occur. When the government has finished its case, there will be a motion by the defense to dismiss the case because they'll say the government didn't prove its case. The judge will deny that motion and invite them to tell whether or not they have witnesses or defense. I do not think that there will be Trump on the witness stand under any circumstances. I think that was all just a dance so that he could help his attorney talk about what Trump would say if Trump was on the stand without saying that Trump would say it. Also, then they had those hearings to find out what dirt they had on Trump so they could anticipate lines of attack from the government. The sad statement about the lawyering in this case is however good or experienced these lawyers are, they've made a very classic mistake when representing someone who runs a case like a mobster and talking about Trump. And that is that the client tells the lawyers what to say. And I've seen this in cases I've handled, and Roy Cohn was particularly adept at handling cases. In fact, he appeared on his own behalf when he was indicted, and he managed to get an acquittal. But Trump is no Roy Cohn. These lawyers don't know how to push back on Trump. And so I would say advantage people of the state of New York and of our entire nation and nations abroad that look to us and say, what exactly is America up to? What are they doing? Do they have this under control? And I think the answer is we certainly do. Now, in terms of other things going on, I think you get a kick out of the fact that Rudy has been suspended from his daily radio show in New York. I think it's WABC. And it's because he continues to lie about the election and whether it was fixed or not. And so he was asked to agree not to discuss it and to say that anymore, and he refused to ignore this admonition, and as a result, boom, he's off the air. Good riddance to bad rubbish. Now, another example of perhaps independence, maybe courage, being his own man, if you will, is the young Barron Trump. Barron Trump was announced that he would be a delegate to the Republican National Convention, and Barron has said, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to be a delegate. I will not be there. I think that's a statement against his father, obviously. I think it's a statement about how he sees himself, well, as an individual, certainly. He's too young, perhaps, to see how he sees himself in the Republican Party and in the public arena where people who strike out and make statements. I was relatively young when I got involved. I was passing literature. I was passing literature in grammar school and high school. That's different than attending a national convention. I didn't attend a national convention until 1980. And I had, by that time, been a law clerk. I'd been a prosecutor. I'd been in private practice. I'd been active in campaigns. But still, another sad loss, I don't know how many of you know or remember, Pete McCloskey. He was a Republican congressman, and he died at 96 in this last week. And the reason I mention him is because he struck me as a noble individual. That is, he allowed his mind, he allowed rationality, and the standards that he understood to be his guide as to how he should act publicly. And what he did was he sought Nixon's ouster. He decried Nixon, Richard Milhous Nixon, for prosecuting an illegal war. And he stood by that position, and he took other independent positions. And he was more like the kind of public servant that is the best of us. And in recent days, we see too much on the nightly news and too much in print and too much in motions in the halls of Congress and our governing bodies and in courtrooms that are about lies and about manipulating a system rather than fulfilling a public charge and an oath, particularly that our legislators take, that they totally ignore. Finally, in the category of environmental matters that I've talked about from time to time, the dairy farm workers are considered to be at risk because they may be exposed to the bird flu virus, which is in dairy cows. And so they're trying to protect them, eye protection and masks and so forth. They think the ability of this flu to spread could be dramatic. Now, some are saying, oh, well, we're safe if the milk is pasteurized and so forth. You would be wise to drink less milk. And perhaps after a certain age, we really shouldn't be drinking milk. We're not a cow. We don't have several stomachs, but it's more of that. And you might read some things about what milk could do. And go get yourself some almond milk if you want to have a white substance that won't hurt you and can help you. The way I feel about where our country is that we are unnecessarily weak in identifying and perpetuating and encouraging our nation state to respect the values that a government needs, that any individual needs if it's going to have character, and if you just multiply that across the nation. So what am I talking about? There are laws we should follow. There's a constitution we should respect. Now, I don't mean the abridgments of individual rights and liberties. I don't mean two rules for different people. And these things have grown in the last several years, certainly since Trump came on the stage, the public stage. But what he did was he released this ugliness, this political pollutant that, given its head, sorry for the mixed metaphor, will continue and in the end bring down our democratic form of government. We would only have ourselves to blame if that happens, because like Hitler, Trump has told us exactly what he intends to do. So when he gets into office, if he does, he'll do it. Those who think Biden is a fuddy-duddy and he's old, he's not much older than Trump, and he's a man of character. Now, do I disagree with him on a variety of things? Yes, I do. I think that our society is unequal. But when gauging the achievements of Biden, even with the things that we disagree about, and where he would take America, if for no other reason than to have a man of character instead of a character as our president. And if the presidency was a stand-up comic show, that would be one thing, but it's not. We see it in the things that are going on now. We see these bad decisions in the courts. We see things happening against persons of color. We see women compromised in the right to be let alone. We see lies rife in every direction, in every forum, and people act as if that's normal. Yeah, I can lie if I'm not under oath. Well, no, you can't. And when people lie, we should punish them as much as if they were under oath, because we can't have a government in which you can't rely on what people say. I was a kid in the South Bronx. We didn't have any big agreements to make. But in my experience, kids who didn't come from wealthy families, and we weren't educated at the time we were having these experiences, and there were, I didn't know anybody who went past high school when I was a kid. But when people agreed to do things, they did them. I have seen in my professional life, particularly in recent years, People sign 200-page documents and then ignore the content and don't fulfill it. No character. This country can't exist without character. This country can't exist if we treat our own as Trump would. The character of a civilization, how we define it, is how we treat our own. And right now we're not doing a good job of it. So we have a lot to work with, a lot to work on. And I stand by, metaphorically speaking, Bragg in New York, and a prosecution that's been well done, has been executed with some of the best lawyering we've seen in a large public case in a long time. And you know, some people talk about O.J. Simpson. That was nothing compared to this. If you want a dream team, the dream team in the courtroom, in this case against Trump in Lower Manhattan, is the prosecution team. They have given us a taste of what real law is. And the judge who presides over this difficult case has shown us how one, through public service, in his case as a judge, can have the kind of character that it takes in difficult times to help America appreciate the credible procedure, the fair procedure, and the outcome when Trump is convicted. Oh, some would say, oh, he's innocent until proven guilty. This is true. That is the legal question. But there's not a person among us who hasn't heard all the facts before. And if the court trial has done anything, it's given us additional reason to believe that we've always been right about this guy Trump. And we should not, for one instant, confuse the office that this man has sullied with the person who is nothing more than a common criminal. So I say good evening to you from my stance in my home office, dry and warm. And with any luck, I'll be out tomorrow. Ironically, today I got in a good swim. So like I said, if my eyes appear funny, it's because I spent a fair amount of time churning up the water, competing with the people in the next lane, doing flip turns, even though it cost me the breath to keep doing it, because I don't usually do flip turns when I'm just fooling around in the pool. So, good evening. Nice talking to you. Sorry I haven't been with you as much the last couple of days between the weather and other obligations, but hopefully we're back on track. All the best. Bye-bye.